Schizophrenia is a severe mental disorder affecting approximately 1% of the global population. Characterized by symptoms such as delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking, and cognitive impairments, schizophrenia poses significant challenges to individuals and healthcare systems worldwide. Despite decades of research, the precise etiology of schizophrenia remains unclear. Current theories span a wide range of disciplines, including genetics, neurobiology, psychology, and sociology. Each theory offers valuable insights but also presents limitations when considered in isolation. This review proposes a unified theory that positions heightened sensory sensitivity and cognitive overload at the core of schizophrenia's etiology. By integrating diverse theories and empirical evidence, this framework aims to provide a holistic understanding of how genetic predispositions, environmental stressors, socio-economic factors, and neurobiological mechanisms interact to precipitate schizophrenia. The implications of this theory extend beyond academic interest, suggesting novel approaches to prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. Highly sensitive individuals, often possessing heightened intelligence, experience the world differently. Their acute awareness of sensory stimuli can lead to cognitive overload, particularly in environments with excessive or conflicting sensory information. This review explores how modern urban living, socio-economic stressors, and genetic factors contribute to the development of schizophrenia in such individuals. Through personal anecdotes, empirical data, and a synthesis of existing literature, this paper seeks to foster a deeper understanding of schizophrenia and encourage multidisciplinary research efforts.
Highly sensitive individuals report experiencing a heightened reaction to everyday stimuli, which can be overwhelming and lead to cognitive fatigue. For instance, sensitive individuals might find ordinary sounds, such as the hum of a refrigerator or distant traffic, intensely distracting or even painful. These subjective experiences are supported by empirical evidence showing that such individuals have lower thresholds for detecting sensory inputs across auditory, visual, and tactile domains. Empirical data gathered through standardized tests, such as those conducted using the Hearing Test app on Android devices, reveal that individuals with heightened auditory sensitivity can detect sounds at significantly lower decibel levels than the average population. This increased sensitivity exacerbates stress in noisy environments, contributing to a state of cognitive overload. For example, in a quiet office setting, a highly sensitive person might be distracted by the faintest sounds of typing or the distant murmur of conversations, which most people would easily ignore. Visual sensitivity also plays a crucial role. Highly sensitive individuals often notice subtle changes in their environment that others might overlook, such as slight variations in lighting, colors, or movement. This constant influx of visual data requires continuous processing, leading to cognitive exhaustion. In busy environments like shopping malls or crowded streets, the sheer volume of visual stimuli can become overwhelming, leading to symptoms of anxiety and mental fatigue.
Tactile sensitivity further contributes to the cognitive load. For some individuals, the sensation of clothing tags, the texture of fabrics, or even a gentle touch can be irritating or painful. This heightened tactile awareness requires additional cognitive resources to manage, particularly in environments where physical contact is frequent, such as public transportation or crowded events. The integration of these sensory modalities compounds the overall cognitive load. A highly sensitive individual navigating a bustling city, for example, must simultaneously process an overwhelming array of sounds, sights, and tactile sensations. This continuous sensory barrage can lead to cognitive overload, resulting in symptoms such as difficulty concentrating, irritability, and eventually, if persistent, more severe mental health issues like psychosis. These experiences suggest that heightened sensory sensitivity is not merely a personal inconvenience, but a significant risk factor for cognitive overload and, consequently, mental disorders such as schizophrenia. Understanding the sensory processing challenges faced by sensitive individuals provides valuable insights into the complex interplay between environmental stresses and mental health.
The relationship between urban living and mental health has been a subject of scientific inquiry for decades. Historically, humans evolved in natural environments with lifestyles that required constant but manageable sensory engagement. The rapid urbanization that began with the Industrial Revolution marked a significant departure from this natural setting. Cities grew rapidly, becoming hubs of economic activity and cultural exchange. However, this growth came with increased sensory input and stress. Studies have shown that the incidence of schizophrenia is significantly higher in urban areas compared to rural settings. For instance, research conducted in densely populated cities such as New York, London, and Tokyo reveals a higher prevalence of mental health disorders, including schizophrenia. These findings suggest that urban environments, with their constant noise, visual stimuli, and high population density, may contribute to cognitive overload and mental health deterioration. Living in a city involves navigating through a constant barrage of stimuli. Traffic noise, construction, crowded public spaces, and the rapid pace of life all contribute to an individual's sensory load. For highly sensitive individuals, this overload can be particularly debilitating. The persistent exposure to urban stressors not only affects day-to-day functioning, but also has long-term implications for mental health. For example, a highly sensitive person might find it challenging to filter out irrelevant stimuli, leading to chronic stress and anxiety, which are known risk factors for schizophrenia.
One significant consequence of urban living is sleep disruption. Studies have shown that city dwellers often suffer from poorer sleep quality compared to those living in rural areas. Factors such as noise pollution, artificial lighting, and irregular work hours contribute to this problem. Poor sleep is a well-documented risk factor for a variety of mental health issues, including schizophrenia. In highly sensitive individuals, the inability to obtain restful sleep can lead to heightened stress and a decreased ability to cope with daily challenges. Comparative studies between urban and rural populations provide compelling evidence for the impact of environmental factors on mental health. For instance, individuals living in rural settings with access to natural surroundings and less sensory overload report lower levels of stress and better overall mental health. This stark contrast highlights the role that urban environments play in exacerbating sensory and cognitive load, thereby increasing the risk of schizophrenia. The mechanisms through which urban environments impact mental health include increased cortisol levels, chronic activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) axis, and alterations in neurotransmitter systems. These physiological responses to prolonged stress can lead to structural and functional changes in the brain, such as reduced gray matter volume and impaired connectivity in regions associated with cognitive and emotional regulation.
Socio-economic status, SES, is a critical determinant of mental health. Lower SES is associated with a higher prevalence of mental health disorders, including schizophrenia. Factors such as poverty, unemployment, lack of access to healthcare, and poor living conditions contribute to this increased risk. The chronic stress associated with financial instability and social disadvantage can lead to cognitive overload and mental health deterioration. Racial disparities in the prevalence of schizophrenia are well documented. In the United States, Black and Hispanic populations exhibit higher rates of schizophrenia compared to white populations. These disparities are often attributed to socio-economic factors, systemic racism, and differential access to healthcare. However, genetic predispositions and cultural factors may also play a role. It is crucial to consider the intersectionality of race and socio-economic status when examining the risk factors for schizophrenia. Contrary to the assumption that schizophrenia primarily affects those from lower socio-economic backgrounds, Many individuals who develop the disorder come from wealthy or high-performing families. This phenomenon suggests that factors beyond socioeconomic status, such as genetic predisposition and environmental stresses, are at play. High expectations, academic pressure, and the stress associated with maintaining a high socioeconomic status can contribute to cognitive overload and increase the risk of schizophrenia. The transition to university life is a critical period for mental health. The academic pressure, social changes, and increased independence can be overwhelming, particularly for highly sensitive individuals. This period of heightened stress and cognitive load coincides with the typical age of onset for schizophrenia, further highlighting the role of environmental and psychological stresses in the development of the disorder. A personal case study of an individual from a Caribbean background who developed schizophrenia after entering university underscores the complex interplay of genetic, socioeconomic, and environmental factors. Despite coming from a supportive and high-performing family, the stress of university life triggered the onset of the disorder. This example illustrates that even those with apparent socioeconomic advantages are not immune to the impacts of stress and cognitive overload. Understanding the socio-economic and racial factors that contribute to schizophrenia is essential for developing effective interventions. Policies aimed at reducing socio-economic disparities, improving access to mental health care, and addressing systemic racism can help mitigate these risk factors. Additionally, support systems for students transitioning to university life, including mental health services and stress management programs, can play a crucial role in preventing the onset of schizophrenia.
Genetic factors play a significant role in the development of schizophrenia. Studies involving twin and family genetics have shown that the heritability of schizophrenia is approximately 80%. However, no single gene or group of genes has been definitively linked to the disorder. Instead, a complex interplay of multiple genetic variations contributes to the risk. Genes associated with neurotransmitter systems, neural development, and immune function are among those implicated in schizophrenia. The dopamine hypothesis has long been a dominant theory in understanding the pathophysiology of schizophrenia. It posits that dysregulation of dopamine pathways leads to the positive symptoms of schizophrenia, such as hallucinations and delusions. More recently, the glutamate hypothesis has gained attention, suggesting that abnormalities in glutamate signaling, particularly involving the NMDA receptor, contribute to both positive and negative symptoms. These neurotransmitter theories are not mutually exclusive and likely interact to influence the overall risk and manifestation of the disorder. Neuroimaging studies have revealed structural and functional abnormalities in the brains of individuals with schizophrenia. These include reduced gray matter volume, particularly in the prefrontal cortex and temporal lobes, and altered connectivity between brain regions. Such changes are thought to result from a combination of genetic predispositions and environmental stressors. Additionally, neurobiological mechanisms such as oxidative stress, neuroinflammation, and impaired neurogenesis have been implicated in the pathogenesis of schizophrenia. Chronic stress and elevated levels of cortisol can have profound effects on brain development and function. Cortisol, a key stress hormone, influences various brain regions, including the hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and amygdala. Prolonged exposure to high cortisol levels can lead to neuronal damage, reduced neurogenesis, and impaired cognitive function. These effects are particularly detrimental during critical periods of brain development, increasing the risk of schizophrenia. Prenatal exposure to stress, infections, and malnutrition has been linked to an increased risk of schizophrenia. Maternal stress during pregnancy can affect fetal brain development through the activation of the HPA axis and the release of stress hormones. Infections and inflammatory responses during pregnancy can also disrupt neurodevelopmental processes, contributing to the risk of schizophrenia in offspring. The concept of brain reserve refers to the brain's ability to compensate for damage and maintain function, despite the presence of pathology. Individuals with greater brain reserve are thought to be more resilient to stress and less likely to develop schizophrenia. Factors that enhance brain reserve include higher intelligence, education, and engaging in mentally stimulating activities. Conversely, chronic stress, substance abuse, and poor lifestyle choices can deplete brain reserve and increase vulnerability to schizophrenia.
Psychological theories of schizophrenia emphasize the role of stress and coping mechanisms in the onset and progression of the disorder. High levels of stress can overwhelm an individual's coping capacity, leading to maladaptive behaviors and mental health issues. For highly sensitive individuals, the threshold for stress tolerance is lower, making them more susceptible to cognitive overload and psychosis. Effective stress management strategies, such as mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and social support, can mitigate these risks. Family dynamics and childhood experiences play a crucial role in mental health outcomes. Adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, such as abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, are associated with an increased risk of developing schizophrenia. Conversely, supportive and nurturing family environments can provide a protective buffer against stress. Understanding the role of family dynamics in schizophrenia can inform interventions aimed at improving family relationships and reducing the risk of mental health issues. Sociological perspectives on schizophrenia focus on the impact of social structures, cultural norms, and economic conditions on mental health. Social isolation, discrimination, and lack of access to resources are significant stressors that can contribute to the development of schizophrenia. Additionally, societal attitudes towards mental illness can affect the willingness of individuals to seek help and the quality of care they receive. Addressing these sociological factors is essential for creating a more supportive environment for individuals at risk of schizophrenia.
Stigma surrounding mental illness remains a significant barrier to effective treatment and support. Individuals with schizophrenia often face discrimination and social exclusion, which can exacerbate symptoms and hinder recovery. Public education campaigns, anti-stigma initiatives, and efforts to promote mental health literacy are crucial for reducing stigma and improving outcomes for individuals with schizophrenia. Cultural differences play a significant role in how mental health is perceived and treated. In some cultures, mental illness is stigmatized and misunderstood, leading to delays in seeking treatment and poorer outcomes. Understanding these cultural differences is essential for developing culturally sensitive interventions and improving access to mental health care. For example, in some Asian cultures, mental illness may be viewed as a sign of weakness or a source of shame, leading individuals to hide their symptoms or avoid seeking help. Community-based interventions can be effective in addressing the social determinants of mental health and providing support for individuals with schizophrenia. These interventions include peer support programs, community mental health services, and initiatives aimed at improving social inclusion and economic opportunities. By addressing the broader social and economic context, community-based interventions can help reduce the risk of schizophrenia and improve outcomes for affected individuals.
To test the proposed unified theory of schizophrenia, experimental studies should be designed to assess the interactions between genetic predispositions, environmental stressors, and sensory sensitivity. Longitudinal studies tracking individuals with known genetic risk factors for schizophrenia from childhood through adulthood can provide valuable insights. These studies should include comprehensive assessments of sensory sensitivity, cognitive load, stress levels, and environmental exposures. Conducting research on sensitive topics such as mental health requires careful consideration of ethical issues. Researchers must ensure informed consent, protect participant confidentiality, and minimize potential harm. Additionally, studies should be designed to provide benefits to participants, such as access to mental health resources and support. Existing datasets from large-scale epidemiological studies and biobanks can provide indirect evidence for the proposed theory. By analyzing data on genetic risk factors, environmental exposures, and mental health outcomes, researchers can identify patterns that support the interactions described in the unified theory. For example, studies that examine the impact of urban living on individuals with a high genetic risk for schizophrenia can provide valuable insights.
Clinical trials testing interventions aimed at reducing sensory overload and stress in high-risk populations can provide evidence for the theory. These trials might include mindfulness-based stress reduction programs, cognitive behavioral therapy, and environmental modifications to reduce sensory input. By comparing outcomes in intervention and control groups, researchers can assess the effectiveness of these strategies in preventing or mitigating schizophrenia. Testing the unified theory requires collaboration across multiple disciplines, including genetics, neurobiology, psychology, sociology, and public health. Interdisciplinary research teams can leverage diverse expertise to design comprehensive studies and interpret complex data. Collaborative efforts can also facilitate the translation of research findings into practical interventions and policy recommendations. In-depth case studies and qualitative research can complement quantitative data by providing rich, detailed accounts of individual experiences. Interviews with individuals with schizophrenia and their families can reveal insights into the interplay of genetic, environmental, and psychological factors. These narratives can help refine the theory and identify areas for further research. Future research should focus on exploring the mechanisms underlying sensory sensitivity and cognitive overload in schizophrenia. This includes investigating the neural correlates of sensory processing, identifying biomarkers of stress and cognitive load, and examining the impact of early life experiences on brain development. Additionally, research should explore interventions aimed at enhancing resilience and brain reserve in high-risk populations.
The proposed unified theory of schizophrenia posits that heightened sensory sensitivity and cognitive overload are central to the disorder's etiology. By integrating genetic, environmental, socio-economic, and neurobiological factors, this framework offers a comprehensive understanding of schizophrenia. Highly sensitive individuals, due to their lower threshold for sensory input, are particularly vulnerable to cognitive overload in stressful environments. Urban living, socioeconomic disparities, racial factors, and chronic stress contribute to this overload, increasing the risk of schizophrenia. Testing this theory requires a multidisciplinary approach, combining longitudinal studies, clinical trials, and qualitative research. By examining the interactions between genetic predispositions and environmental stressors, researchers can develop more effective prevention and intervention strategies. Policies aimed at reducing socioeconomic disparities, improving access to mental health care, and addressing systemic racism are crucial for mitigating risk factors. This review highlights the importance of considering sensory sensitivity and cognitive overload in understanding schizophrenia. By fostering interdisciplinary research and promoting holistic interventions, we can improve outcomes for individuals with schizophrenia and contribute to a more comprehensive understanding of mental health.
The proposed unified theory of schizophrenia presents valuable insights and perspectives that can significantly contribute to the scientific community's understanding of the disorder. Here's why. Novel insights. 1. Sensitivity as a core factor. The emphasis on heightened sensitivity, auditory, visual, tactile, as a central factor in schizophrenia provides a fresh angle. While sensitivity has been acknowledged in some contexts, the comprehensive exploration of how it leads to cognitive overload and stress-induced psychosis adds depth to existing theories. 2. Integration of competing theories. By synthesizing various theories of schizophrenia, genetic, neurochemical, psychological, and sociological, into a cohesive framework, this theory highlights how they complement rather than contradict each other. This integrated approach can help in forming a more holistic understanding of the disorder. 3. Environmental and socio-economic stressors. The detailed examination of how urban living, socio-economic status, and other stressors contribute to schizophrenia provides a broader context for understanding environmental impacts. This can guide future research and public health policies. 4. Personal anecdotes and empirical data. Incorporating personal experiences and experimental data to illustrate points makes the theory relatable and grounded in real-world observations. This approach can inspire more research into subjective experiences of sensitivity and schizophrenia.
Known information restated. Stress as a risk factor. The role of stress in schizophrenia is well documented. However, the specific focus on how different types of stress, sensory overload, urban living, socio-economic pressures, uniquely affect sensitive individuals adds a nuanced perspective that can enrich existing literature. Genetic and environmental interactions. The interaction between genetic predispositions and environmental factors is a well-accepted concept in the etiology of schizophrenia. This theory supports this interaction, but with a unique emphasis on sensory sensitivity.
Value to the scientific community. 1. Provides a unified framework. By integrating various aspects of existing theories, this framework can serve as a foundation for more comprehensive research. 2. Encourages multidisciplinary research, highlighting the interplay between genetic, environmental, and sensory factors encourages a multidisciplinary approach, fostering collaboration across fields like genetics, neurobiology, psychology, and sociology. 3. Promotes personalized approaches. Understanding that sensitivity varies among individuals can lead to more personalized treatment and intervention strategies, improving outcomes for those at risk of schizophrenia. Final thoughts. While some elements of this theory restate known information, the combination and presentation of these elements offer a new perspective that can inspire further research and discussion. The insights into sensitivity and cognitive overload as central to schizophrenia are particularly compelling and warrant attention from the scientific community.